Hey guys, it's Dan Condell here from Ugly Mug Marketing, and in today's conversation, we're going to talk to Allie Green, the founder of Kohana. It's a remote consulting company, and what she's going to talk about, we're going to talk about today, is how to keep the culture when you go from a business or a company where you're all working together to a remote, and also how do we keep accountability not only for yourself but possibly even for your team. So without further ado, I'm going to get Allie in here, and we're going to kind of go over some helpful tips and give some resources for y'all.
Yeah.
Hey Allie,
everybody.
how you doing?
Hi. Good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to share more about this topic.
Of course. Thank you for coming. Okay. So first off, in your experience, when this is one thing I hear a lot is from business owners is they're concerned of maybe how the productivity of their employees, and how do I know they're actually working? How do I know when actually things get done? Am I going to lose productivity by going remote? What is your experience with that?
Yeah, so a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek answer there, but I question managers and business leaders that come out with that as one of their first questions with remote work and challenge, how do you know when your employees are working when they're in the office? I think there's a myth that bodies in seats or bodies in an office sitting in front of a computer means that you're productive. There's plenty of studies out there that show that people that work from home actually have the opposite problem. They have a lot of problems like turning off work and finding the boundary between, shutting down and getting away from the screen at the end of the night. Mm-hmm. What I think is an important shift in conversation is twofold. One is, how as a business leader can you be really clear about your expectations of the work getting done in terms of what does done look like, what are the success metrics that you're going to evaluate success on, and what milestones can you use to hold accountability from the stakeholders involved. And to break that down further, an example would be something like if you're working on a multi-phase marketing plan, getting all of the stakeholders together and saying, okay, well, done looks like the plan is finished and we're ready to implement. Mm-hmm. Success looks like all of the stakeholders have signed off and we have all of our next steps in place and the tools and technology ready to go. We expect weekly updates on the progress of this so far, and meetings should happen when X, Y, and Z decision needs to get made. And I think that if you lay out that criteria, it gives your employees the bounds in which they can operate and start tackling the actual activities or conversations needed to push a project forward. I also think having some sensitivity to productivity, given everything going on in the work climate absolutely. Right now with COVID, is really important. And I think there's two things at play there that business leaders can really incorporate into their remote work culture, knowing that this is an emergency remote work situation. It's not your day-to-day normal working from home experience. And I think the two things there's lots of people out there that are fearful about the situation at hand right now and how COVID-19 is impacting themselves or their friends or family members, not only from a health standpoint, but like having kids not in school and at home. And like if you have a child that falls and is crying and you happen to be on a conference call, like the sensitivity of like, oh, go take care of that situation. Or if someone accidentally comes behind your screen, like it might not be the best situation, but it's happening because everybody's adjusting. And also the fear of like people losing their jobs. And you hear these stories of really great companies having to furlough employees. And so I think having routine updates, even if the update is we have no updates, mm-hmm. can instill a sense of trust in your employees that they will mimic that behavior and give routine updates on their work product as well. And so as leaders, you give them updates about like the vision, the safety, and the security of their job. Okay. You give them updates on your expectations. And as a employee, you then give communication upwards to, this is how far I've gotten on your expectations of my work product. And having that type of back and forth communication will build that culture of trust.
Yeah. I think that's a really great point, is that accountability actually goes both ways. And I think you're absolutely right. If not only if as the manager or the owner of the company that you're holding other people accountable, it's also really important that you're held accountable. So that also, I think, gets a really good give and take in understanding that we're all in this together. I was thinking about when you said like everything's changed culturally a little bit and what's different in professionalism and videos. I would say probably about 50% of the calls I'm on, my 9-month-old is probably sitting behind me or sitting in my lap. It's just because that's the way my wife and I have had to adapt. And I think that's just been generally accepted because it's not just us. I think, like I said, most calls I have, at least there's a kid in the background or something. So it's been interesting how that's just been accepted as a norm now. And everybody just collectively understands that's just the way it is.
Yeah. And I think there's two groups of people when it comes to video communication and showing yourself in a professional work environment. But while you're clearly working from home, there's people that try to overcompensate for that and make sure things are like very professional or like nothing going on behind your screen. I'm of the camp that adding a little bit of humanity to work only helps you get to know the people you're working with better and increases a sense of vulnerability-based trust with your colleagues and with the people that you manage. And it gives you more insight to the complete person they are and not just who shows up to the office. So even seeing like the books in your background or the guitar makes me want to ask you things and get to know more about like, oh, Dan, what are you reading? And you can continue to build relationships with your colleagues, even though you're working remotely. While I think there's this fear that if people aren't spending face time together, these relationships are just going to, start to disintegrate. And I think there's really powerful ways where having that little bit of humanity and humility and just like everyone's making the best of the situation is helping this we're all in it together attitude, and embracing that and leaning into that will help you continue to like grow your culture as a company.
So, yeah, absolutely. I think that's something we've noticed on our team meetings is that we're doing in different places and there's always something in the background that you ask questions. So it's actually kind of put us in a position where we've gotten to know each other. We're a pretty tight knit group, but gotten to know each other a little bit more on a personal level. So that's absolutely. One question for you too on this matter that comes up is motivation. I guess it comes a little bit hand in glove with accountability, but also the fear is that they're home, they're going to be distracted, and what's their motivation to work? So how do you keep your teams, or in your experience, your teams motivated, whether it's just, and also not just culture, but what's the word I want to look for? Morale, I guess, would be. How do we keep our morale up in this situation as a company?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all answer. I think it really gets to be about knowing your people and figuring out what motivates them in any situation, and also, really importantly, what demotivates them. There's a few ways that people generally are motivated intrinsically at work, and that's having a clear alignment to the mission or the end product of what's being provided to them in that challenging and stimulating work environment. And so as a manager, if you have an employee who really has that need for achievement, who wants to push themselves and challenge themselves, knowing that you can rely on asking them for more complex projects and work, even though you're remotely, and being hands off and say, hey, like, you have the runway to lead with this, but these are the results we see, and this is how you can check in with me, will really push them to like prove that opportunity was worthwhile. For employees that are more motivated by the social aspect of work, and I think a lot of people transitioning from working in offices to working from home struggle a lot with that loneliness and isolation, because people definitely are motivated by their need for affiliation with others and like hanging out with their colleagues and having that cup of coffee in the kitchen, and then you start talking about your projects and you're brainstorming, and all of a sudden, like, boom, you get a really new cool idea and you want to go implement it. Finding ways to recreate that in the work environment is incredibly important, so that you're offering an outlet for those people. Asynchronously, I think there's great tools out there to have that water cooler chat and banter. Slack is a leader in the space for that. There's also an alternative called Mattermost that is really great. I think there's ways to integrate that into your synchronous time talking to people as well. And so making sure as a manager you have still one-on-one video meetings with the people that report to you so that they can feel connected to you and you can check in on them, making sure that you spend a few minutes at the beginning or the end of Zoom calls, depending on your company culture, to really just sort of like connect with each other and talk about the fun stuff is important. And if it feels awkward on video, because I think I've been working remotely for 4 years, so video communication feels sometimes more natural to me than going into an office and I'm like, ooh, where do I sit? And like, who do I look at? Because I'm not just looking at the screen. But for other people, video communication can feel really awkward. And I think having preset questions you can ask your employees is a really great way to like get them to start opening up socially on Zoom or whatever video communication tool you use, which will make them more willing to say like, I'm not really feeling motivated today, I need help, which is the end result managers want. We've held team meetings where questions I've asked would be things like, if you had to be stuck in a weather phenomenon, with like, what would you want to be stuck in and why?
Okay.
Like, what background do you wish was behind you when you're on a Zoom call? Where's the weirdest place that you've taken a conference call before? So there's lots of different things depending on your culture, your sensitivity of like asking personal questions of how to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, is that not to just make the Zoom calls business when you get there, to still have that kind of one-on-one conversation. Something that we started doing that's fun is that at the opening of our meetings, our weekly meetings, we have a game that we do. One of the things we did is everybody submitted their baby pictures, and then we just went through and guessed who was who, which was fun. And that kind of keeps kind of an attitude. And we've done other stuff like, we're just a little trivia. So that way it's still kind of that fun banter, and it's not every time we sit down at a computer, it's just quick business. And a couple of things that we've implemented that I think has helped with our culture shift is we've kept some of our policies in place that are usable. One of which is we call distraction time. And that's basically, unless it's even because the impulse is even greater sometimes, because you have text messages and you have messengers, you have emails, is to not call or disturb somebody in between the 50. So if you have a question for someone in departmentally, well, you're only allowed to reach out to them at the 50 of the hour. And then once that's over, then you pass. So that's helped us kind of give us an opportunity or give us a place to have small talk if we want to have it, and give it a designation without it going all over the place and causing some distraction, structure issues.
Yeah, I think that's really important too, is to like separate out focus time for like heads down work, as well as time to like integrate and be more social. And in an office environment, there's physical cues you can use, like going into a conference room or putting in earplugs. That's harder to do when you're across the screen. I love the idea of the 50s. I've done something similar where it's either full days for no pre-scheduled meetings, so people can truly like work based off of when they're feeling most productive. Like if that's a day where someone really needs to sleep in because they're just, feeling really overwhelmed by everything going on and not sleeping well, that they can sleep in and know they don't have to wake up early for meetings. So like full on, like no meeting days. I've seen people check and communicate on a schedule. So like right when they start working, their halfway point at the end of the day, or following more of like a Pomodoro schedule where they're checking in after each circuit of like 20 minutes of focused work. And so I think, that's another great example of just like things to add to your toolkit to experiment with.
Yeah, I did for a while play with the Pomodoro clock. And for those who are not aware of that's a clock that goes for like 20 minutes of productivity, and then 5 minutes, it's usually 5 or 2 minutes worth of where you're allowed to be distracted, and then 20 minutes worth of concentration time. The thought process being that just your cognitive energy will start to fade out if you try and stare at a computer for more than an hour. We've all been there. We stare at a computer and then you realize you've been sitting here and you zoned out 20 minutes ago. That's what a Pomodoro clock will help with. Great recommendation. It's actually something I haven't thought about in a while, but that's a really effective tool. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was going to say, and I think there's like fun ways to play with it too. So like one thing I like to do since there's no one in my office to really disturb, is I play around with the type of music while I'm using Pomodoro.
Okay.
So I might use like classical music for my 20 minutes of focus, and then like one really funny like throwback pop song that I love, and I'll get up and I'll sing, and I'll get this energy that makes me re-motivated to like work when I sit back down.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think a lot of us, when we get into remote, and this is a misconception, I really do think, is that people will work less when they work remotely. I'm personally, and I know you and I've talked about this, I'm just the opposite. I have to remind myself to stop, because there's not that 9 to 5. It'll bleed right into the evenings. So I do really think that people will tend to be more of it, and at least more of the struggle I've noticed is not working enough, but actually working far too much, and then getting into a burnout phase. What are some of the other things that through your career and giving advice to people and consulting have you noticed have been, I hate saying top 5, but what are the most common obstacles that people are facing, and how do you advise them through that process?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I think everything that could create tension in the shift from working in an office to remote work kind of boils down to definitions, expectations, and clear boundaries. So definitions, things that we already talked about, like what is the definition of done? Like what is the definition of hey, do you have a second to look at this, or can you get to this to me by end of day? Well, now that we're working from home, is it end of like a traditional work day, like 5 p.m.? Is it by the end of the day, like before that person goes to sleep? Because I think even being very explicit on how you define those things can reduce tension. If a manager has it in their head that end of day is 5 p.m., but the employee is like, okay, well, I'm going to have dinner with my family, and then I'm going to finish my work, and I'll get it to this person by 11 p.m. It might create a bad relationship between the two, where the manager starts to lose trust. Oh, my employee's not working well when they're working from home. They might check in more frequently, and then the employee will feel frustrated because they're feeling overwhelmed by all this communication. And they're like, well, I got it done before I went to bed. So like, what is the problem? So I think the more you can be clear on those definitions is quite important. I think expectations and just being really clear on things like, when is your availability? When are you going to be working? When are you free to have synchronous communication? Even expectations around communication. Do you default to asynchronous, or do you default to jumping on the phone and calling someone if you're stuck? Like, what are the behavioral norms there is really important. And in terms of boundaries, like exactly what you said, I think that both business leaders and individual contributors need to be really self-aware around their boundaries with technology to make sure they're not sucked in to being always on. And as a leader in an organization, I think leading by example, and being present when you are present at work, and then shutting off when you're not working, is a great way to maintain those boundaries and just like reiterate the office culture and reiterate like the understanding that we're all kind of going through this crazy thing together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. And I think something that you brought up in there is excellent, is that also the boundaries are not only just for your employees at your work, it's also for you, knowing that that there needs to be some sort of structure in creating that, so that you're not inundating them with emails and requests, and then your expectation is that they're going to respond and they don't because it's outside. And then there's that old breakdown. And that certainly, we've all been there where we have an email and we read into it, maybe some things that we shouldn't have read into it, just because, and I'm guilty of this myself because I tend to be really short with an email. So reading something that's not there that you wouldn't normally get in a face-to-face conversation. And that also brings up one last point, is that explore other ways of communication, doing like a video chat. I find often, if I literally just takes me a minute to write it out, where I feel like I have to actually emote some emotion in what I'm saying, and it may come up too dry, I'll shoot a quick little video, kind of like the one I sent you earlier. Is just, I feel that may be more appropriate than maybe typing something out dry. So there's a lot of different avenues that you can do this with. You don't necessarily have to hop on a face-to-face time like we have now. but there's a lot of
Yeah.
services you can use.
I'm a very visual person and a bit old school. Like I still very much believe in pen and paper. And so it was really funny at my last company. I was known for drawing out sketches of my ideas and taking pictures of them and then sending them to my team instead of trying to make like a fancy thing in some design kit or to have an elaborate like speech or text for people to read through. And so I would always just be like jotting down these pictures, taking a picture of it, a screen grab, and then sending it off to my team. Nobody else really did it back, but it was the best way for me to communicate, and everybody knew that. And the expectation was like, Allie really likes visual things. So sometimes she's going to like send it to us. And then like, we can go back and have a meeting and like pick her brain on like what, was going on when this circle met that square.
Right.
And so again, it just goes back to expectations and really having that self-awareness of how do I best communicate to be efficient and save time? How do the people I communicate with like to be communicated? What is everyone's styles and preferences, and trying to adjust and cater to them as necessary.
Sure. All right. Well, your time's precious here, so I don't want to take too much of it. I want to kind of just wrap this up and bullet point it for everybody. So some of the things that we discussed today is one of the key things in creating culture is understanding, is keeping some of the same routines that you have that you can implement. It's also understanding that things are a little bit different. And this is not just like what's been traditional remote working. This is a confined remote working. There's going to be kids involved. So it's all understanding that sort of thing. And maybe even implementing things that get to know your staff or your team better. I suggested something like the baby picture thing. You can set that up really easy. If anybody has any questions, you can just email me. I'll show you how they did it in a Google Forms. It's really easy. And also in the accountability, that it goes both ways. So let people know that what you can be accountable for, set clear expectations on communication. These are the times that I'm going to be able to speak. These are the times that I can be interrupted, and so on and so forth. That's kind of the summary. Please interject anything I might have glossed over, and any other ideas or thoughts you have.
I think that's a great summary. Overall, I think the things to focus on again are clear definitions, clear expectations, and creating boundaries, not just for yourself, but for your team, and then leading by example.
Absolutely. Allie, thank you so much. Where could people find you if they'd like a little bit more information on what you do? Is Kohana, is it
It's kohana.io. So if people are interested, I have been communicating some remote work tips there as well as on LinkedIn. So my full name's Allie Green, and you can feel free to follow me or reach out and check out the website. My mission is to continue to help educate and inspire teams to do their best work regardless of where or what their office looks like. So definitely through this remote work phase, but also into the future, navigating flexible schedules, work from home, or fully distributed teams.
Awesome. Allie, thank you so much. I know you're super busy. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today, and you enjoy your time. You're over in France right now, right? So you're a couple hours ahead of me.
In France, and almost sunset here. It was great to be able to talk with you all today.
Absolutely, Allie. Thank you so much, and you have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.